Hey there. So I did most of my service learning at Innovations Early College High School. It's located in Salt Lake Community College in their South Campus. It's a much different high school than what I've usually been in that it's very online based and student centered with that technology. Students are able to do modules made by the teachers at their own pace. They can choose their own spaces to work. They do have classes throughout the day that they have to check into, but it's very sort of loose and it it can be seen as kind of a negative. I see it more as a positive, especially with interacting with the students that like sort of the freedom of the school. Um, the ELL situation, at least a third of the school are English language learners. There's several different levels. I've spoken to some students who did not have very fluent English at all. Other students that spoke it incredibly clearly. Um, but for the most part, there is a fair amount of English proficiency in the school. The administration is super supportive of English language learners and for the most part gets them the resources that they need. Um, the classroom itself is mostly computer based. There's just computers sort of everywhere all around the school. But it's very bright. It's very clean. The school has a lot of kind of that supportive academic signage. Um, but yeah, for the most part, really, really well put together. Really good morale within the school, and really good teachers and administrative support. For my first example, it's the same as that I posted before. The I do not do good at English. This demonstrates an abundance of what's known as do support, especially in clarifying their ability in English. Um, for the most part, it's not prescriptively correct to say I don't do good at this. Kind of how like, hey, how's it going? It's like I'm doing good. The prescriptive rule is say I'm doing well, but sort of the descriptive or what's more commonly used is I'm doing good or I do good at this instead of I do well at whatnot. So yeah, it's incorrect, but it's definitely not going to be called out on anybody. Um, but yeah, in writing, if it was to say that, I would probably correct it. In this case, the student really wanted me to revise the paper, and so because she had said this, I decided to ask, okay, do you want it heavily revised and edited, or do you want just kind of a very basic one that'll get your meaning across? And she said heavily revised. So in that case, yeah, just asking the student kind of how they want to proceed with their own sort of learning. My second example, a student was reading a passage, and the passage had written, she lifted it and walked with it over to the window that was lightest. And the student who reads out loud normally, um, so we pronounced it as she lifted it and walked with it over to the window that was lightest. So not pronouncing the dental consonant with the T sound, especially in it, and over to the window that was lightest. Granted, the T sound, especially even for me, gets dropped, but it was really apparent with him, especially since the other T sounds, the dental non-sibilant fricatives in that and the, he pronounced, and if the T sound came at the beginning of the word, like to, he would pronounce it, but when it came after the first sound, it would just be dropped. But for this, usually I've worked with students before and he always reads out loud and it's great because he sort of puts an inflection or he'll ask me about words that he doesn't understand the pronunciation of or he wants to know what their meaning is. So with that, I just try to stay without like calm. I don't try to like jump on any word that he sounds like he's confused on. I sort of wait for him to go over it a few times and then ask, or he'll sort of put an inflection on it that'll make it sound like a question. For my last example, the written one, It is, when I was 9 years and my mom took me to another country. I don't know how to speak, neither read or something like that. I remember my mom said we only went to that country to visit our family and vacations, but the true was that my mom didn't come back to Utah. So for this, yeah, tense structure, lack of preposition, that originally was an entire paragraph instead of 4 sentences that I kind of had to break it down into, and that was the whole paper throughout. Um, but in that one, it's just kind of like regular sort of grammar instruction would be needed, just with the basics. But that kind of content in the passages that she was writing felt incredibly personal. So to heavily criticize that and say it doesn't matter really what you wrote, you're wrong for these reasons, felt a bad move, especially in the moment. Um, Instead, I just talked to her about, okay, like generally you want to make it as clear as possible and remove run-ons, but overall, like a really strong and very personal um, sentiment in your piece for the prompt. Thanks.